As you'll hear, for every episode of The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, this podcast has benefited from a contribution by its script editor, Andrew Cartmel, who gave his time for free. He hasn't asked me to do this, but I think it's fair to point out that at the time of recording his contribution, Andrew was all set for the release of the 7th of his vinyl detective novels, which is called Noise Floor. There are 7. This one was published in the UK in March, on the 19th of March 2024, and the US on the 9th of April. As I say, it's the 7th of the vinyl detective novels from Titan Books, which are all available, including this 7th and newest, right now. So I will point you in their direction with thanks to Andrew, whose contribution to this podcast I know you'll enjoy immensely. Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Hadoke, ask a friend to choose their favourite things about a Doctor Who story, and then I commentate along and see if I can guess what they are. And in the case of this story, I also ask the script editor what he thinks.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to you, Toby. I'm Connor Adkins, and I'm typically a Doctor Who artist who happens to draw an awful lot of Doctor Who in realistic format. And I'll show you a bit of that a bit later. But today, I'm here to challenge you to see if you can guess my favourite parts from the Doctor Who story, The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. Let's see what you got.
Well, welcome, folks. I'm sure you'd like to know we're at the start of a brand new podcast show. Ha ha ha. It's The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. That's the name of the Doctor Who story that we're watching. I cannot claim that this podcast is the greatest show in anything, but it's mine own. This, I think I'm going to enjoy. I haven't seen this story for ages, and cards on the table. I really like it and was saddened when my friends and podcasting brothers in arms, my filthy, badly behaved brothers who are much funnier, partially because they have license to go to places that a family podcast like this would never go, at a wheezing, groaning sound. Not only were they their usual filthy selves, but they hated this, which I think is a shame, because although I've struggled with the McCoy era as when it went out because of my age, and I was at that difficult age of, I discovered you could hate the thing that you loved, and I revelled in picking over Doctor Who's shortcomings and being cross with it. But this story, it was my favourite story of the season. And I mean, that again speaks to my psychology. I liked the fact that I celebrated the less obvious one, because of course everybody loved Remembrance of the Daleks the most, I was cross with Remembrance of the Daleks because that had things like the Daleks saying exterminate 13 times before the cliffhanger and all those other things. And I love Remembrance now. Go back and listen to my Happy Times and Places on that. But this one, I've always rather loved it. Will I still love it now that I'm a sort of more sensible grown up and aren't trying to? I mean, I wasn't trying to be a performative. I'm trying to psychoanalyze myself because I'm a navel gazing narcissist. But that's how I think my predilections are to sort of want to not be the one. If everyone likes Remembrance of the Daleks, but I was not looking forward to this one at all. I remember when Doctor Who magazine was previewing it and going, it's got the guy from Adrian Mole, and it's got clowns, and it sounded, and it's got and Jessica Martin's an impressionist, and I was not looking forward to this one, and I'd hated Happiness Patrol, which was the other sort of oddball story, and that was how we termed these stories that weren't about alien invasions. If they had something slightly sort of strange or quirky, they were the oddball story, and the build up to this, I thought it sounded awful, and I thought it was going to be terrible. I remember being furious that Adrian Mole was in it, and after part one, I was like, oh no, this is really, really good. and we'll get into the reasons why. So I'm glad it's been chosen by Connor, who I've not met, but whose work I've admired online. And I try and get a mix of people, and I try and I don't want it just to be mates of mine, and also if it's somebody that has a skill. And Connor is an excellent artist whose work I really, really like. I don't think this podcast breaks any records, but some people listen to it. And if you are a Doctor Who fan who likes artistic expression that is somehow provoked by Doctor Who and its many manifestations, then Connor's work is worth checking out, and I will do links to his Twitter and everything else at the end of the show. But that's why I asked him on the show. I like what he did. I like what he does, and I reached out to him, and he very kindly responded. So, yeah, he's not a mate of mine. We've not met, but I'm going to very much enjoy watching Greatest Show in the Galaxy with him. Well, I hope so. It's funny though, because when I listen to Wheezing Groaning Sound, which is an excellent but very rude podcast with three people, and I'm not going to start on how they scored Time Flight, which I've just listened to, but I get more excited if I think the three of them are going to hate the story, because it's great fun listening to somebody wittily pulling something apart. And I know I'm secure enough in my opinions that it doesn't bother me if they don't like something that I like. Well, I mean, it does a bit bother me. It bothers me. I've remembered that they didn't like Greatest Show in the Galaxy, and they're totally wrong about The Deadly Assassin. But anyway, if it's one that they're going to like, I'm sort of like, I kind of like it more when you hate things. So, which means that the whole format of this podcast is ill-conceived and wrong for its target audience. Oh well, but I suspect this is going to be a love-in. I very much like. I've always very much liked certainly the first 3 episodes of this story. The fourth we may have to talk about, but I remember loving this at the time. I've watched it a lot since, but I haven't watched it in quite a long time. I haven't seen this, well, since I've been in this house, and that's 5 years. Since I moved back to my house, I haven't seen this for a long time. It's not on. It's not on a Blu-ray box set, so I've not even rewatched for those purposes. So yeah, it is a while since I've seen this, and yet there will be scenes I know of verbatim. Okay, so let us. And we can do it on the Whoniverse now, on the BBC iPlayer. I'm going to ask you to press play on episode 1 of The Greatest Show in the Galaxy in 3, 2, 1. So yes, here we are. This was season 25. They changed the order, didn't they? Because Silver Nemesis needed to be broadcast as around in the anniversary week, and so I remember this one being on over Christmas, because I'd got into a habit actually of recording the trailers, so, because I knew I'd worked out when they were going to be come this week or tonight on BBC, and I'd record the trailers. And I remember that this one's full of Christmas. It's surrounded by Christmas stuff because it was a Christmas time broadcast, wasn't it? Or the lead up to Christmas. It was very, all the continuity and packaging and all of that was Christmas time. Now, some people don't like this, and of course this was the first one to be directed by Alan Waring, the first one to be scored by a Doctor Who fan, Mark Ayres, who's now a friend of mine and whose work one was aware of because he'd done stuff for Dwas, and he'd done a beautiful theme at a Panopticon, and it was a fan getting to work on the show. Wonderful. And of course rap was a thing, and this has having the record scratching, and I love the fact that because of Rico Ross has that slightly sort of pockmarked and carbuncled skin, that they've made use of that by having him turn to the camera after the sort of Tom Baker scarf, the disappearing juggling ball. There's so much lovely attention to detail. But I love that opening. I love the opening sort of rap thing because there's an incongruity about it. You don't expect at a circus to be that sort of record scratch. And that kind of music, and then they have that, and you go, "Oh, this is a bit strange, this is a bit odd." But then they have that turn to camera where it shows that perhaps the facade has some, sort of some sort of ugliness to it, if you like. And then you have that sort of quirky bit of something slightly unexplained with the Doctor's ball disappearing, and you've got Ace in the Doctor's scarf. So many lovely little bits. I like a stripy top as well. But it moves at a lick as well. You know, we've had that opening, then we've had the bit of the TARDIS, then we've had somebody arrive on Seganax. You know, the story gets going really, really quickly. I think I like the idea of malevolent clowns, or clowns full stop, because clowns are brilliant. Clowns are a brilliant device for scaring people because they look, you know, superficially happy. You know, we always think of the tears of a clown, the incongruity there, that there's a sadness behind the eyes. So therefore go, well, let's turn that even further on its head. Instead of there being sad clowns, they're being evil, killer clowns. And that ends up being one of the most successful elements, I think, of this particular story. She's great. I think the fact that Ace is scared of clowns is very good, and I like the positioning that they have. You know, it's nicely blocked that she's favoured, but he's behind, but up because he's up the ladder. That's all very smart. Alan Waring, I think, announces himself as a director to really pay attention to, and I do think, you know, let's take Harper out of the equation, because, you know, he's the obvious great of the 80s, and then you have, I think, you know, Peter Grimwade, who is exceptional and very good at, you know, action and adventure and pace and, you know, keeping it. But I think Alan Waring is the other great talent of, and you know, the fact that he's continued to have a TV career. I know he does a lot of soaps and things. In fact, I auditioned for him once what was it for? It doesn't matter. You don't care. It doesn't matter. But I didn't get the job. So he's a very good director. He's a mate of Graham Harper's, though. And I think he's an excellent director. And I think he does a brilliant job on this. And I think he comes in to Doctor Who when it's, you know, it's on its arse a little bit, certainly reputationally. And he goes, no, I'm going to really, you know, work to... And because what they've done here is, of course, they've taken the sound away from the hearse. You can hear the tides, but yeah, so it's a sort of silent hearse, which I think is beautiful. And it's blacked out windows, but with a clown. That's a fantastic image, and one of the greatest Doctor Who one-off villains of all time, the chief clown in Ian Reddington. But Mark Ayres' music is brilliant here. It's subtle, it's slightly disconcerting, slightly funerary here, of course. But again, this has that wonderful thing of, you know, it's tense. It's you know, it's circus, which is very 20th century, which is very, you know, analog. But you have things like the electronics in the car and the mechanics and the robotics that are in incongruity, that are you know, make it a slightly strange and unsettling version, having a futuristic seeming version of a 20th century thing that I think really works. And then you've got that lovely sand dune shot that we just had, which again it's just going to, I mean, this is, you know, it's a Doctor Who quarry, but it's not. It's an alien world. I mean, they're lucky with the sun, I think, because it makes the water look a beautiful, sort of clear blue, but it makes the sort of sun-drenched sand. You know, imagine if it was a sort of grey, rainy February. It would look terrible. And Peggy Mount, who oddly I didn't. This is the weird thing about John Nathan Turner's sort of stunt casting, is that I didn't really know who Peggy Mount was, but she's great, isn't she? And I always think that this. I think Sylvester McCoy, who I think has Achilles' heels in his in some of his performance repertoire, but I think he's really good at acting the disgust of the whatever it is the Stools lady is throwing out. Oh, Chris Gard, who I sort of know a bit, and Dee Sutherland, and a kiss in Doctor Who. It's so rare that you get a proper kiss in Doctor Who. Doctor Who is a very chaste program in the in its first iteration, which I don't think is a bad thing. So that seems, and again, in such a sort of strange, oddball story, to have these moments of real humanity helps to sell that, helps to acclimatize us to this slightly odder, strange world. And Dee Sadler was, a well-known face at this time, because she'd been in, I rather fancied her in No Place Like Home sitcom with William Gaunt and Daniel Hill and various others. So I was delighted when she was in Doctor Who, but I think because of the way that the cast had been announced, I think I knew she wasn't long for it. I don't know if they did a big sort of cast list announcement and then she was announced, somewhere else, or anyway. I certainly, going into this, I think I knew that Flower Child wasn't long for this world. I thought, God, aren't we lucky that Doctor Who's getting, an actress like Dee Sadler for only one episode. She was, I don't know if she still is, the other half of Charlie Fairhead from Casualty, Derek Thompson, one of the BBC's longest running hires. But she's, I think she does Facebook and stuff, doesn't she? But I think they, and obviously it's easy to work out what it is that they're eating. The dogs. It's basically, I think it's sweet corn and in mayonnaise that's been put inside a sort of hollowed out, gaudy pumpkin-y thing. So yeah, and I think they portray these circus types without sort of caricaturing them or sending them up. But Chris Gard playing Bellboy, who again he'd been in A Woman of Substance. He and Dominic Gard were, and of course Dominic Gard, his brother, is in Terminus, and in fact his sister-in-law Sharon Juice, Chris Gard's sister-in-law Sharon Juice, was in Ghostlight in the future. So she's in Ghostlight next year. Whilst Leslie Dunlop, Christopher Gard's wife at the time, is in the Happiness Patrol. And of course Chris Gard is now with Kathy Shipton, who is the other really long-running member of the cast of Casualty, the other one of whom is Derek Thompson, who is, or was, I can't quite keep up, with Dee Sadler. I love this scene. Danny Peacock here, I will do something horrible to your ears. I love that. I don't know why. I just think it's really funny. And Danny Peacock was a big favourite in our house because he was one of the ensemble sort of supporting cast of the Comic Strip Presents, which was comedy spoofs that were among the first things on Channel 4. It was Rick Mayall, Adrian Edmondson, written by Peter Richardson and Pete Richins, and Edmondson, Mayall, French and Saunders were the sort of mainstays, but Peter Richardson acted in them as well, and Keith Allen and people like that. But the first one I ever saw was called War, and Danny Peacock was actually the sort of lead in it. And sometimes he'd just do a couple of scenes, and sometimes he was a sort of main, the main protagonist. But there was a sort of ensemble of them, as I say, and so we always rather liked Danny Peacock in our house. So when he appeared in Doctor Who, it was I liked it whenever any of the alternative comedy bunch appeared in Doctor Who, like Alexei Sale or whatever, because it meant my brothers, who were a bit older, who'd put Doctor Who aside, that if there was somebody from a sort of thing that grown-up people of 19 or whatever watched, it gave it a sort of alternative allure, and I think Danny Peacock is great. I saw an interview with him recently where he's still turning up in stuff. I saw him in something concurrent with the interview where he said, "Oh, he's not really acting anymore, and he's working in an old in a care home, but he is still acting. But he's not the he's not the well-known face that he certainly was during the 1980s. Oh, so that's the end of Decent. This is redone in ADR. You can tell. Yeah, you can just tell. I can tell, but not necessarily by the slightly off lip sync, but by there's something about the character of the sound. But that's because they've taken out the sound of the hearse, so they have to redub the actors, and also it enables them to have that shot where they walk further away from the camera and you can't see the boom shot. Although you could have mic'd them up differently. But anyway, see, even that, look, she's there, sort of not silhouetted but framed against the light and up and behind, and he's closer. It's just imaginative staging. Alan Waring not only has an eye on the pace and the atmosphere, but his eye on creating, visually arresting pictures is fabulous. And look, I think that water looks good. Again, this could look like, really naff landscape, because you associate it, stick a couple of guys with hard hats and high-vis vests and a digger in there, and it just looks like a grutty old quarry. But this, I do feel that Segonax feels like an alien planet. Now, T.P. McKenna was an actor that, I'd seen in a few plays for today, and I remember one that's got him and Maurice Roeves in it, and David Calder, and thinking, oh, why has T.P. McKenna never been in Doctor Who? So I was very chuffed when it was announced that T.P. McKenna was going to be in a Doctor Who. And then I was cross that they announced Jessica Martin, because she was a comedian, and Doctor Who should be for serious people. They don't want comedians in Doctor Who. Of course, utter nonsense, because she's a fine straight actress, but and she's fabulous. Again, it's all those teenagery things where I was on the lookout for things to go wrong. As I say, I'm only being honest about them because it now amuses me to see that behaviour still exhibited on by Doctor Who fans. Some of them in their 60s about anything that they haven't seen this thing yet, but they're already furious about it. And I have to hold my hands up and say, that I am wired that way as well. I love this. The tin mug, the cup and saucer, the tea on an alien planet. This is a world where, yes, and I remember because he was called Captain Cook, I was like, well, there was a Captain Cook, so this is unrealistic, this is silly. But of course, it's a bit sort of 2000 AD. Is it a bit? It's a bit sort of, but it's kind of they know there's already a Captain Cook, but they're creating a world of slightly larger than life, slightly comic strippy, slightly strange characters. But you can create a world like that so long as it is a consistent world, and it allows you to do things that you wouldn't do in something set on a council estate or whatever. And I think it works. I think it works fine. I mean, I think this robot's a struggle. They struggle to stage this well. Look, I mean, McCoy's doing his best there. But he's having to not really move, and she's having to not really move, and that's having to miss. There's so many things when you've got fewer cuts and fewer shots available because of the nature of it and stuff. But it's a useful scene because it shows, it's very clever storytelling because it shows about the buried robot. It shows that Captain Cook is selfish, all of that. But that I don't think that's the best staged sequence in the story. It's a compromise, and but everybody works very hard to make it work. But I suspect they weren't. It was one of the bits they were probably less happy with. That's great, isn't it? She's dead with her eyes open. Don't get many of those in Doctor Who. I love this minimalistic score of Mark's. I think it's great, and you see a lot of Christopher Guard's flesh, don't you? And again, he's post-dubbed here. He's ADR'd because we don't hear the car. I love this. Ian Reddington's decision to play, with that dusky voice, that husky voice when he's speaking as the clown, when he's not acting as a clown, and the mix between that and his performance as a clown is a great sort of shorthand for villainy, and I think he holds himself really well. His body language is excellent. And that makeup job is superb. I think Ian Reddington. Did I call him Ian McKellen earlier? I don't think. Slip. I can't remember. It was seconds ago. I know Jessica Martin wanted to play this as Glaswegian, didn't she? Which I think would have really worked, especially with that sort of punky look. But you see, that was deemed a step too far for a Glaswegian accent on 7:30 on the BBC or whatever. But you'd absolutely do it like that now. I love Jessica Martin. I think she's great. Again, I've sort of got to know her a little bit on the circuit. And I think she's fab in this. And we actually don't see enough of her these days, I think, on telly. I think she's great. Because, of course, she's the voice of the Queen, isn't she, in Voyage of the Damned? I was so angry about this sequence. See, again, as I love this story, but there were bits but I had an eye on, and I hope I'm not like a broken record when I talk of these things, an eye on the general public watching it, and I didn't like this bit. I thought it was silly. I didn't quite, buy the. I didn't like the bus conductor full stop. Which is, of course, man, because actually the idea of a malevolent robotic bus conductor is a very Doctor Who thing. I love that shot. That's a nice bit of comedy where he's there and the two of them look at him. But I was so angry about that bus conductor sequence. Looking at it now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But because it was a potential chink in the armour of this thing that I otherwise thought was amazing, and it's so good. So incredible that they've pulled this off. They have such limited space, but this sort of bit, the ticket office, where so much of the action takes place, is a good use of space. And Morgana, Deborah Manship, who never really had a great career. I didn't know her before this. She's a sort of lesser known actress in a part that turns out to be rather big. And I remember she wasn't announced as one of the guest cast, because it's quite a cast up show. It's got familiar faces in smaller roles, so it's actually nice for her as one of the lesser known faces to actually have a much bigger part than some of the other people. And Rico Ross, who's an American, was an American based in the UK. I met him in America. I met him actually at Gallifrey. I bought him a glass of wine. Because he was talking to Debbie Watling, and we all just ended up in the bar at Gallifrey, and he was back in the States then, and we had a little bit of a chat. And he was quite happy turning up to a Doctor Who convention, which was rather fun. But I was delighted to see. I went on holiday once, and we had with my dad, who I didn't see very much, and there was a telly that had films on kind of rotation. Or on a loop, and one of them was Lethal Weapon, and one of them was Aliens, and I'd seen Aliens before, but not when I noticed everybody who was in it. So when watching Aliens, I was like, oh God, that's when I was on holiday. That's Rico Ross, and then I was delighted when it came, because I think the first time I watched it when it was on the holiday, it was halfway through, and you have to sort of wait for it to come around. So when I actually watched Aliens from the very beginning, I was delighted that he gets his name on the opening credits, even though there are some troopers who do a lot more than him who don't. Credits work in a very interesting way, and I think it's because he'd got another job and he chose Aliens instead of it, so they rewarded him by giving him, billing at the front of the film. It's all very complicated stuff. This is quite a nice gag where she's going, oh, you're a nice boy, and he goes, I want to go to the Psychic Circus, and the look on her face is great. But I remember being furious that Adrian Mole, Jan Samarco, was in it, because, again, he's sort of playing an Adrian Mole sort of type, and it's like going, why is Doctor Who, the programme of very gritty stories like Terror of the Autons and programs with soldiering and all of that. Why it's basically got. I didn't make the Doctor Who fan connection initially. In fact, I even got a feeling a friend had to point it out to me. And certainly not in this episode, but it was basically going, why have you got Adrian Mole playing Adrian Mole in Doctor Who? That points to the artifice, that points to the construct. But I this is great. This is great. I mean, it looks fantastic, doesn't it? But the idea of having a scary circus is great, and I think this is done with such economy and oddness. You can't see the crowd because we don't know that there isn't one. Something terrible is happening to him, but we don't know what it is. She's bothered by this, but there's also obviously something a bit weird going on with her. And screaming is hard, and she does it absolutely fantastically. But she does more than that. She's showing that there's something a bit weird going on with her. And then you have this amazing that's brilliant. I love the weirdness of that he's got a device. I mean, what else can that device do? Does it make you? It can't be a device that just drowns out somebody's screaming. But it doesn't matter, because I think that is really weird and strange and disconcerting. And again, it's also scratching beneath the surface of the the veneer of the joyous of the circus and what it's supposed to represent, and also I like a cliffhanger that isn't kill them now, or they will be exterminated or whatever, and that cliffhanger is, when you first receive it, slightly disappointing. You go, oh, hang on, that was such a great episode. What that he's asking her if she wants to come in, but then you think about it and you go, well, no, it's because obviously it's a bit weird and she's a bit scared, and it's a sort of mood. It's a mood cliffhanger rather than, and give me that over the Doctor climbing over the side of an ice barrier and hanging from his. I know that's a particularly egregious one I've chosen, but even a kill them now. I think this episode sets this story's stall out and says, I'm quite a strange episode of Doctor Who, and I'm embracing my weirdness. I think that is, I mean, it's got so many things going for it. But I think what's really lovely about it is that it's weird. It inhabits that slightly OTT world of the Doctor Who stories like Paradise Towers and Delta and the Bannermen and the Happiness Patrol. Kind of operated within the slightly funky, comic strippy, caricatured-y. Am I right to say there's elements of 2000 AD? I seem to recall Judge Dredd had sort of characters that were strange, sort of bizarre echoes of Earth type sort of cliches and stereotypes, but dialed up and deliberately so, and that characters were types, which actually there's a good history of in Doctor Who. A lot of Robert Holmes's literary pastiches, the characters are types, but they are totally believable within that, like the policeman in Talons of Weng Chiang, who are like, you're causing an affray, sir, and would you accompany me back to the station? And they sort of walk and talk like those sorts of policemen from that kind of literature would, and you wouldn't necessarily expect to have a conversation with them, but within the confines of what they're doing, they absolutely evoke the atmosphere and style that they should be, whilst being absolutely true to their surroundings. And there's something comforting and something enjoyable in that, and you're allowed that in programs like Doctor Who in a way that you're not with other programs. So if Doctor Who does that and embraces it, I think that's power to its elbow, and I think it balances extremely well in that episode, because you do have the creepy kites in the sky with, again, Marquez's minimalist, spooky, atmospheric, disconcerting score. You have that creepy hearse with clowns in it. Absolutely fantastic. A silent hearse, but with electronic noise when you get the windows, but behind which is, that excellent clown makeup and malevolent, off-putting chief clown gorgeous. Ian Reddington being quite brilliant, quite brilliant. And that's the episode in which he does the least, really. He really comes into his own later. But I mean, and this is where my problem's going to lie, because I have to choose a favourite thing about each episode and an overall favourite thing. And if I don't choose something, if I go, I'll choose Ian Reddington in episode 3. Well, if Connor chooses him in episode 1 or 2, I then can't, because he's already taken it. Whereas if I get in and Connor chooses him in episodes 2 and 3, well, I get the point for that. So I have to preempt what Connor might do, and this, I think Ian Reddington is great, but I think I will have to choose him for one of the other episodes. I think Alan Waring has to be chosen, because I think he so announces himself, and deals with a lot of Doctor Who's issues as a first timer really, really well, and tackles an unusual story that would be tonally very, very easy to get wrong, and absolutely makes it work. And I think the fact that this, and especially as he's cast some actors that could lead you to think this is going to be a bit of a panto. This could be silly, the guy best known for Adrian Mole playing Adrian Mole, the guy from the comic strips, Peggy Mount, Jessica Martin the Impressionist, and even Dee Sadler was at that time best known for a sitcom role. But everybody takes it seriously, even the characters that were playing sort of larger than life characters. Nobody's sort of mugging. And I think Nord the Vandal totally works. I think he's really funny. He's this sort of idiot biker thing, and I love that line. I'll do something horrible to your ear. Would you like me to do something unpleasant to your face? I love the way he goes, no one rides with me, for I am Nord Vandal of the World. And the fact that he's got the slightly weak R as well, sort of adds to the whole thing. And I very much had that as a teenager. I worked hard to lose it. Not that I have an issue with anybody having one, but I worried it would stop me being able to be an actor. Although, of course, Danny Peacock's had a fine career as an actor. And there was an actor called Edward Wilson who was in Rockcliffe's Babies and did a lot of work for the National Youth Theatre. Edward J. Wilson, who had also had a very, very weak R. But David Collings did too. But that's why he rolls his R's so often. But it totally works with Vandal of the Roads. So, and of course it had an extra element, echo there, of Rick from The Young Ones, who also, who was a slightly absurd character whose confidence was at odds with his abilities. So many different. I love the environment. I love the way that quarry looks. I think it looks amazing. I love the idea of, I didn't even talk about it because we're talking about so many things. I love the junk mail that talks back. That's a really good way of describing what that is. It's a robot sales pitch, but it sort of, it mocks you, it guilts you into going. And I think that's a really nice idea. And they then describe it in a way that makes sense to a contemporary audience. Oh, it's junk mail. It didn't look like junk mail, but that's what it is. It's junk mail. And it's junk mail. And I like that it's sort of, when it goes, are you scared? I am, that's so good. I love the pacing of it. It moves at a fair lick. And a lot of scenes, don't last very long. And then to another one. And I think it's paced really beautifully. I love the opening rap. I think that's a real mission statement for the story. That says this is going to be slightly off kilter. There's going to be things. There's going to be things that are familiar yet slightly different, and that's what Doctor Who kind of does. It reminds me a bit, actually, of as I record this, we've just had, the start of Russell T Davies's second go at being in charge of Doctor Who. Second go. That sounds really good. This is second triumphant reign, actually. but it seems to be slightly more fantastical than his first go. And we've had the Goblin Kings, we've had the Giggle and Wild Blue Yonder and Starburst. They're all, I think, more closely related to Greatest Show in the Galaxy than they are to the Ambassadors of Death or whatever, or Genesis of the Daleks. And I it's weird because it was, even though I loved Greatest Show in the Galaxy at the time, my preference was for sort of hard hitting, militaristic, grown up Doctor Who. I hated the Happiness Patrol, for example, at the time. Although I did like Paradise Towers. I like to be contrary. So maybe I like the sort of fantastical and weird and oddball more than I think I do. Because if you asked me straight, I'd go, no, I much prefer that. I'm a Hinchcliffe era kind of guy. That's my ideal sort of Doctor Who. But I do have a soft spot for the weirder ones. And I think it's because fortune favours the bold, really. And I think it's quite easy to get a hard-hitting or a scary Doctor Who right. You can at least sort of coast along with it. You can at least get away with doing a half decent adventure if you've got those ingredients. Whereas I think you have to really work hard to make the stranger ones. You're treading a much finer line, I think. So good for them. Good for them for trying it. And I think they make it work. So what's my favourite thing about episode? I do love those scenes with Nord. I don't know why. I used to endlessly quote those as a kid. I used to play act in my head all the time on the way to the bus or just sometimes in my bedroom. I used to do that scene all the time. And the rap. I do love the rap. People find it embarrassing. I think it's really good. As I say, because it's strange. Really, I love the music. I love Marquez's score for Greatest Show. I think it's great, and it really adds to the elegiac way the story sort of plays itself. But I think it's such an announcement, and he is so key to getting everything working coherently and cohesively, and also because I'd gone into this story dreading the thought of it, and it's the way that it carries itself off stylistically that won me over and that stopped me thinking about that and fixating upon the strangeness and made me actually buy it. And it has to be the director, Alan Waring. He has to be my thing for episode 1 because he would be my thing for the whole thing, but I've got a feeling that he would get chosen before that. I don't know, because that's the thing about this podcast, is that some people choose a different person for everyone. Some people choose a different scene. Some people choose... I don't yet know what Connor's approach to this is and what kind of things he will be choosing. So that could have been... So there's no point second guessing or double guessing. And I want to acknowledge Alan Waring, because I think he actually doesn't get enough praise for the work that he does. I think he's the strongest McCoy era director. I think he does an absolutely terrific job, and you can see why they promoted him to the 6-parter, as it were, the 2 3-parters the following year. And I remember being really hoping that they would, and being really, really pleased that they did. And it's a shame that Doctor Who didn't go on, because I think he would have had a great and long association with it. So Alan Waring is my choice for part 1. Let's see what Connor chooses.
So, Toby, you've just watched episode 1 of Greatest Show in the Galaxy. My favourite part of that episode is I like the initial setup of the story about how everything happens to look so light and fluffy on the surface, with it being family friendly and all fun for all the family, but underneath it everything just looks so dark when you get down to the nitty and gritty of it. So, i.e. you've got the 2 robots that are being hidden throughout the desert plains before you get into the actual circus. You've got Flower Child and Bellboy running away from the circus, and you've got the scariness of the chief clown and his cohorts riding around in a black hearse all over the area. making you think there is something very sinister going on around here.
Love it. Why does Nord's hamburger look rubbery, by the way? Because he eats it, so it's a practical burger. But it's like a lot of stuff in this era that it looks slightly unreal, and I don't know why that is. I wonder what the burger was made of. I'm sure there's a chitty somewhere, because certainly a couple of the stall's ladies' fruits look slightly not real. But anyway, let's not get there. I just wanted to mention the burger because I quite like the bit where he throws it away, because again, it's kind of going. I mean, I don't condone throwing food away, and I don't condone littering, but it's a way of making that bridging scene, giving it a little bit of extra action that just gives it says something about his character. You know, it's people are thinking about every sort of second of this, which I really like. But that burger, when he eats it, it doesn't look quite real. Even there are props in this era of the show sometimes have a habit of not looking real, even though it clearly is real because it's a practical burger. If ever I meet Danny Peacock, I will say, what was your burger made of? As I say, I'm sure it's somewhere. Don't write in. But anyway, that's not what Connor was talking about. The beautiful thing that works at the heart of this is that it is a story about, you know, bouncy fun, the bouncy fun of the circus, and scratching away at that and finding, you know, the darkness beneath. Now, and I suspect there's a reality to that as well, is that circuses can be probably like any workplace, you know, a harsh environment. But unlike lots of other workplaces, this is one where the surface is you know, always has to project a positivity and a cheerfulness and a bounce and a joy. So then when the fact that there is a reality beneath that seems a much more stark reality, because it is a huge contrast to, you know, it's probably not much of a surprise that the school staff room is full of people being a bit, you know, sort of grumpy and pissed off, and you know, not the or even, you know, gallows humor or whatever, or ultra grown up stuff that they wouldn't say in the classroom, because of course, what they're having to do in the classroom takes them away from all of that. But that's I'm not entirely happy with this metaphor or this comparison. But what I'm saying is, you know, the facade of a circus is, you know, turned up to 11. It's ultra cheery and joyful and funny. It's funny, isn't it? A circus is funny. Clowns are funny. They fall over. They go boing. It's you know, they're there to make you laugh. They look a bit silly. They've got big feet. They've got red noses. Blah de blah. And the fact that has this, you know, grim, sad, and in this case, deadly underbelly is you know, that the difference between those two things is stark. So it's a real jolt. And that's what Doctor Who does best, is when it takes something that's supposed to be happy and cheery or joyful and fun or whatever, and makes it grim and horrible and scary. So a good choice, and probably what was Stephen Wyatt's inspiration for the story, to go, you know, what's the thing that isn't normally scary that we can make scary. That's what Doctor Who does well, and I think it's a great setting for a show, having Doctor Who set in a circus, and I think it's a really interesting, fun, strange, odd story that negotiates all its different elements very well, pays attention to them, has thought about how to realise them, and has got everybody working in all of those departments working very well, especially seeing as the show nearly got called off and had to have, you know, tent erected in a car park in order to actually pull off being able to do the show. So they were up against it as well, and the fact that they managed to produce something so good whilst being, I'm sure, heavily compromised by practicality, God bless them. God bless them, everyone. So it is the greatest show in the galaxy, Doctor Who, and the greatest show in the galaxy is a story that, for me, definitely deserves that moniker. I think it's absolutely terrific. Again, it's not probably my ideal style of Doctor Who story, and yet I love every minute of that. Apart from, as I say, the slightly clunky robot in the ground scene and the bus conductor scene, but neither of those things bothered me anything like as much as they did when I was a teenager, who was furious about things that weren't quite exactly how I wanted them to be. But I'm much more zen now.
Should we get if we get straight to it? But we'll start with why you're busy. I think it seems only fair to allow you to plug your wares. So, Andrew,
Thank you.
You've kindly given me your time to talk about the greatest show in the galaxy, but the greatest show in the galaxy is not the only thing on your CV, because it's being put up to date even as we speak. So I find you at a busy time. What are you doing?
Well, tomorrow is actually official publication day. Not that that means anything, because people have been buying the book already, but I write a series of crime novels. I actually write two series of crime novels, but the first one was The Vinyl Detective, which is now on its seventh adventure. So the seventh Vinyl Detective story, which is called Noise Floor, comes out officially publication tomorrow, which is March the 19th. In America, I'm sure you have many American listeners. I believe it's April the 9th. There's a slight delay before the American edition comes out. Yeah, so I'm busy promoting that tomorrow. I'm doing a signing for that, but also I'm working madly and joyfully towards hopefully getting another play on. I write stage plays too, as you know. Had a couple on a couple of years ago, and we're desperately trying for at least one production this year, and hopefully two.
Fantastic. And how easy is that these days?
Oh, listen, everything's easy if you've got money. It's just like everything else in the world. So I'm in the position at the moment of funding my own plays. Like I write the crime novels, so I can put on stage plays. So that's basically the ecosystem for Andrew, which works as long as you don't lose your shirt on a play. As long as you only lose, like one sleeve, perhaps the collar of your shirt, you're in a good position to do a couple of plays. So 2 years ago, I put on two stage plays. Took a small loss on the first one, but got wiped out on the second one, which meant I couldn't just keep rolling forward. Otherwise, I would have continued doing two or more plays a year. The idea is get back on your horse now, Andrew. Put on a production. Don't lose all your money this time, and keep it rolling, and hopefully do at least two this year, as I said.
Excellent. Well, we'll make sure we plug those as and when. So obviously,
And even if you just come along, I'd be lovely to see you, Toby.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. Well, talking of putting on shows, let's let's go back to the show within the show, the greatest show in the galaxy, which I've just watched with a chap called Connor Adkins, who is much younger than me, and I think has come to Doctor Who a bit later. But
what a great name, Connor Atkins. Yeah, everybody should have such a great name.
He's a fine artist too, and as I say, from the later generation, but the work still has the power, because we both loved it, but sometimes for the same and sometimes for different reasons. Now, I don't know if you remember how we do this. We choose a favorite thing from each episode and then an overall favorite thing. Now, I don't expect you to have done that, but I'm just trying to work out as I speak whether I should give you the things we do or whether I ask you to. I'm going to ask you if you have a favorite thing from episode one.
Well, I might as well. My favorite thing, obviously, is the first thing that comes to mind, and it's the fantastically creepy clowns driving around in a hearse. Because I remember, I mean, it's a fantastic and abiding image. But I remember we had discussion. I'm getting goosebumps now. Discussion with Stephen, right? Sitting in my office at Union House in Shepherd's Bush Green, talking about it, and we wanted that kind of vibe of the classic Avengers, by which I mean the Emma Peel, John Steed, nothing to do with Marvel Comics, the classic British TV show, The Avengers, and The Prisoner, another classic British TV show. And if you think about those clowns who look like they are funeral directors driving around in a black sedan, that is something that could come straight out of the vintage Avengers or out of The Prisoner. And we were aiming for that kind of timeless, disturbing classic imagery, and I think we nailed it. So well, that's the first thing that comes to mind. I guess it is my favorite thing because I do think it's timeless, and I think we really hit the nail on the head with that. I imagine a lot of people will find that image stuck in their head, and at the root of that is the fact that I think clowns are creepy, and I'm far from alone in that. In fact, there is a word for fear of clowns. I wish I could tell you what it was, but there is a word. It's not clown phobia, but there is a word for fear of clowns.
And I have the other element of the beauty of the car thing is that they take the sound off, or Alan Waring, or whoever decides that whenever you see the car,
They drop the sound out.
they
That's
drop
a
the
subtle
sound.
detail that I didn't remember.
And that so your choice is it's called coulrophobia. Coulrophobia. Coulro.
That's so wonderful.
Coulrophobia is the fear of
Yay.
clowns. There we go. We've been Reithian as well, Andrew. I'm loving this.
Fantastic.
So Connor and I both chose different things. What's interesting is a couple of times we chose the same thing. We both chose different things for episode 1, but they both kind of tie into yours, because Connor's favorite thing, and any of us could have gone for this, was the general setup. He said the circus content, and he summed it up by saying, it takes a thing that looks light and fluffy, scratches away, and underneath there's darkness, and the circus is the perfect setting for that. And of course, a clown is that thing that has that mixture of being an entertaining thing, but it has the melancholy underneath. Well, and you only have to shift aside from melancholy to make fear and scariness. Whereas I chose Alan Waring because I remember as a kid,
Great choice.
because he was a new name, and actually because I was a bit worried about Greatest Show, because I wanted Doctor Who to be all serious and grown up because I was a child. You start going the other way when you get older. So I worried about Greatest Show because it was going to be in a circus, and it got the guy from Adrian Mole in it, and I was worried about it. And then, of course, as soon as it started and it was creepy and it was dark, it was actually my favourite of the season. And I think Alan Waring comes in as a new...
But that's a little bit like the Happiness Patrol, where when people look at the ingredients and they jump to a conclusion about it, which is 180 degrees wrong. Forgive me, you were going on about Alan Waring, and you can't go on too much from my point of view, please.
Well, he just seemed to come in and understand that if you did an extra bit here, like take the sound off the bit, that opening scene when Rico Ross, he's looked at his actor and gone, he's got a slightly knobbly.
So good.
What we'll do is we'll have that opening rap, but then I'll just have him look at the camera, and I'll let the camera catch his slightly sort of pockmarked face to show that there's this kind of dissonant vibe going on. It's just that sort of attention to detail. And even the colour of it's in another sand pit, but the water somehow looks cleaner. The sand looks somehow more alien. He seems to me to be across everything, and the pacing of it and the cutting of it.
Alan Waring was the best director that we worked with during my tenure, Sylvester's tenure on Doctor Who. He's terrific. So what a great, I wish now I'm going to steal that choice.
Well, you can do whatever you like. And what about, I mean, Connor's choice is interesting because you've covered it slightly, but the circus setting seems to me, I know there's a circus in Terror of the Autons, but it's a slightly different kind of setup. It's more of a sort of backdrop. But actually having a Doctor Who story in a circus seems like such an obvious Doctor Who thing. So obvious that nobody's actually ever done it.
Well, I was just, while you were saying, I was trying to remember if the circus concept came from Stephen, or just the seed of it came from John Nathan Turner. Let's say it was Stephen, but the thing I do know came from John, which caused us both to wince even then and even now, is John wanted to call it The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. And John had been so accommodating in so many ways. It seemed churlish not to let him have his title for the show. But it's not right, because I don't know, it's sort of a science fiction title from somebody who doesn't understand science fiction, if you know what I mean. So, and it's just kind of clunky, and it sets up expectations. So neither Stephen or I liked it at the time. I don't know what Stephen's position is on it now. I still don't like it, but I feel the title is unworthy of the kind of dark slickness and profundity of the show itself.
What would you have called it?
Oh, Circus of Doom. That's just off the top of my head. No, I would have to investigate it and talk to but that again, that's a classic pulp title, which I like better. And also it sounds like a Doctor Who story. Like it sounds like a classic kind of Robert Holmes, Tom Baker period Doctor Who story. So yeah, Circus of Doom is better than The Greatest Show in the Galaxy.
So anyway, that's part one. We should go our separate ways now and reconvene here for the next instalment. Should we? Well, look, are we going out, or aren't we?
Well, thank you ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke. My special guest watching the greatest show in the galaxy is Connor J Adkins, who can be found on Twitter at Connor J Adkins. That's double M and it's D Adkins, not T. We were also joined by the script editor of that story, Andrew Cartmel, who can be found on Twitter at Andrew Cartmel, and his vinyl detective novels are out now. I'm grateful to both those gentlemen and, of course, to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include James Lark, Lisa and Andrew, Gavin McLean, Steve Manfred, David Matthewman, Jason Mayo, Ross McPhillips, Stuart Mitchell, Nathan Moore, Ian Morgan, Christopher Newman, Matthew Newton, Graham Knott, Dave Owen, Adam Parkin, David Workman, Stephen Waters, Peter Kelly, Brandon Moore, Bill Evanson, James Kersey and Peter Chamberlain. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like your name read out on the credits, that's one of the perks, although it's not obligatory. You can remain anonymous if you wish, of being a patron, which you can become at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, which starts from as little as £3 a month. You get advance releases, bonus material, your own exclusive podcast, monthly AMAs, behind the scenes of DVD and Blu-ray making-ofs, and all sorts of other goodies, including pictures of my dog. You get a 10% discount if you sign up for a year in advance as well. But look, it might not be that you want to do that, and yet you might still occasionally want to throw me a couple of pennies to subsidise broadcasting and self-employed purveyors of podcastery, in which you can go to ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke and just bung a couple of quid in my pot whenever you fancy. But look, I know times are hard, and I know that most of this stuff is free at the point of contact, and that's absolutely fine. That's the deal we make with being producers of our own stuff, and that's a perfectly reasonable way of us going about our daily lives. But if you could spare the time to go to iTunes or Podbean or Spotify or any of those places where you can rate and review, well, a few lines saying nice things and a 5-star review. We're a world of extremes these days, so 5 just means good, even though it's the best score. 5 means you don't want to kill me, so 5-star, because that's what makes these noticeable out there in Cyberville. So 5 stars and a few lines of review. And look, take to social media and say nice things wherever you can, because it really does help. Thank you very much. Talking of social media, I'm on Twitter at Toby Hadoke. These podcasts have their own feed at Hadoke Podcasts. I have a Facebook page, and I'm also on Instagram at Toby.Hadoke, where I'm experimenting with videos and more content and things like that. And I have a website, tobyhadoke.com, that's got a blog that I don't update very much, but it's got a few interesting bits and bobs on it if you're that interested to still be listening. And I run a comedy club called Excess Malarkey every Tuesday in Manchester that I am the permanent resident MC of, and we put on all the best acts in the country and charge very little for it. So if you're around the Manchester area on a Tuesday night, please come and see Excess Malarkey, and you won't be sorry, promise. And that has its own Twitter feed at XS Malarkey, and all its followers got eaten by Elon Musk very recently. What we did was we decided to put the date that the club launched, which was 27 years ago, but Twitter's algorithm went, hang on, that means when you launched, when Twitter launched, you were only 13 years old, which is underage. It's underage for a human, not for a comedy club, and therefore you must have been a baby when you were on Twitter, which means that we will now suspend your account. We finally got the account handle back, but all of our followers had been destroyed. So if you could follow Excess Malarkey, just because otherwise it looks like in 27 years we've accrued about 200 followers, and we did have about 5,000. So help us build back up if you can. Oh, Andrew's great, isn't he? He gave his time there rather wonderfully. And I didn't know he was going to be doing that at the time of recording the commentary, which is why I didn't mention him much, throughout it. I didn't say, and coming soon we'll have Andrew Cartmel, which is why every mention of him has been done sort of
post editing, and this is the sort of last little bit of vocal to be added to this. So I'll just reiterate my thanks to Andrew and the fact that you should get his vinyl detective novels. And my computer is now decided to switch its fan on, which means we're probably getting some unhealthy buzz. So let's turn that off before it starts to be really annoying. And the only way I can turn it off is to stop talking, which also that will stop. That's two bits of annoyance that will now remove themselves from your oral cavities. But thanks for listening.